welcome. My name is Tim Cole, and I'm work with Waypoint Church Partners. We're glad that you're joining us today for this pop-up webinar, 35-minute pop-up webinar that we started doing early as the COVID season started. We've got a whole series of monthly regular webinars that we call the Waypoint 55, and we talk about ministry-related topics in 55 minutes or less. And they're specifically targeted for ministry leaders within the church, whether they're on staff or key volunteers. And so they have a kind of a rhythm of different topics, whether it's your missions committee or your prayer team or your first impressions team or your elders, things like that. But this pop-up series has been more topics related specifically to what's very timely right now during the COVID season. And so very recently, we decided that we should try and have a good conversation about the opportunity your church would have towards reaching out to teachers and parents and students as schools are reopening here in the next few weeks, and the tremendous opportunity you have to do that. And so we're going to dive into that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to, as always, give props to our sponsor for our webinar platform, which is Mid-Atlantic Christian University in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, our ministry partner. And we're glad that they have hosted our webinar platform since we first began 3 years ago. I also do want to invite you to the Waypoint YouTube channel. You'll see our whole library of 3 years worth of ministry-related webinars and the discussion around each one of those. And so this will be posted to that YouTube channel here within the next day or so, that you can invite others to watch the webinar that we're seeing today. So I want to introduce to you today our two panelists, and both of them are very connected to Waypoint. First of all, we got Paul Byers, who is the senior minister at the Woodland Hills Christian Church, which is a multi-site church based out of Abingdon, Virginia, down 81, almost to Bristol. And then we've got Rachel Woolard joining us, and and Paul is also on staff with Waypoint as our representative for the Appalachian area of our region. But then we've got Rachel Woolard, who is the director of communications and operations at the Area 10 Church, which is a Waypoint church plant in the heart of downtown Richmond, Virginia. And so they are joining us. Rachel was on staff with Waypoint for, I don't remember how long, Rachel, was it 8 years?
Yeah,
7 years. All right. So we worked together those years, and now she's working, holding everything together at one of our good church plants in Richmond. And both of their churches have already begun the process for trying to figure out a real meaningful way to serve parents and teachers in their community because of COVID and schools restarting. And so I'm going to just kind of throw it out there to begin with, let them both give a comment, and then Rachel's got a great resource for us to look at today that we're going to use as the kind of the skeleton for our conversation. But Paul, would you tell us kind of the genesis of how your church started thinking about schools restarting and how you guys could be a part of that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And just to kind of reiterate what you were saying, Tim, if we don't accomplish anything through this webinar other than challenging all of us to see this as an opportunity, not only to serve and minister to our families, our parents, our kids that attend our churches, but to serve our community with opportunities to share the love of Jesus in a real tangible way. Every time there's challenges around us as a church, we have to see those as opportunities. And that's kind of what sparked the conversation at Woodland Hills. A couple of weeks ago, our school system finally published their projected schedule for this year, although it's up to subject to change at any time. But for now, we're in kind of a hybrid system where the kids are in class half the week and then doing virtual learning the other half of the week so that they can clean the building in between. And then parents have the option to go fully virtual as well. So at least part of the time, parents are they're scrambling to try to figure out what to do on those days when their kids are home, both just logistics of childcare, what that's going to look like. Are they going to be able to go back to work? Are they going to have to quit work, stay home? Along with childcare, how are they going to juggle, teaching from home and helping their kids with the virtual learn as well? So immediately we begin to kind of scramble and to think about individually and then as a group, our staff, and pray about, what are we going to do? And just immediately ideas like, we're definitely gonna have our student center open during the week, just for middle school, high school students, a place for them to come, because there probably a lot of them are going to be staying at home, not going to any kind of daycare. They can take care of themselves, but their parents are going to be gone 9 hours a day, possibly 5 days a week. And so just a place for them to come and get some help and do homework. We're working on trying to create, a system, tutors for our students, and how to offer that, what that's going to look like, how to offer training for parents and what that's going to look like. But you have to be careful when you pray about something, when you say, God, show us what we can do, because a couple days after we started these conversations, we were actually approached by the Boys and Girls Club here in the Tri-Cities area, Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City. And they had lost their facility, the partnership that they'd had with the church here in Abingdon, to be able to do their Boys and Girls Club, which is normally an after-school program, like 2:30 to 6:30. But because of COVID, they're actually expanding that. So they'll be offering childcare for school-aged children from 7:30 to 6:30. And so they were looking for a place. And so we are actually going to partner with them and provide them a space. They own all the liability responsibilities with that. They're going to manage it. What's really cool about that is that, we get to really we get a lot of good opportunities to connect with families, parents, to show the love of Jesus in a way that really all we're doing is just giving them a space to come. They're managing, take care of all the headache of trying to do a daycare, childcare, school. We knew we weren't equipped to do that, but we could give our space. The other thing that's cool about it is it's not, obviously Boys and Girls Club is not a spiritual entity. And so they can't even provide any kind of moral or spiritual guidance for the kids. However, the director in our area is a Christ follower, and part of the reason why they choose to try to partner with churches is that you can bring volunteers in, both to help with tutoring, that kind of thing, but you can also bring volunteers in to do Bible studies. We would even have the option of doing chapel service a couple times a week, and it would be voluntary as to whether the kids would want to come in. They would choose to come in and be a part of that or not. They can't mandate that they come, but it's an opportunity for us to make a connection there with the kids and to serve them. And like, I know that for a lot of churches, you're not going to have that kind of opportunity. Although like one of the churches that we had even responded to one of the surveys that we sent out, West Waynesboro Christian, they're partnering with the Salvation Army to provide homework toolboxes to send home to the kids. And so one of the things I would just encourage you is to think outside the box. Don't think about your limitations. If you look at your building or your staffing or whatever, don't let the limitations that you see right in front of you, like we would never have thought, we're going to provide, all day care for up to 120 kids. We just wouldn't have done it. Even though we had the space, we never would have taken that responsibility on, couldn't have in the time. But to partner with an organization that's not even Christian, to be able to think outside the box and say, are there organizations in your community, a rec center, YMCA, a daycare, a childcare, schools that you're approaching, that you're just approaching people who are in the trenches, who are already doing it, and saying, and as a church, how could we come alongside you? Is there anything that you need? What could we do to come alongside? And I think it's just a win-win, because we're getting to connect with these organizations who are not Christian, many of them, and showing them the love of Christ, and then also getting to bridge the gap and to bring a spiritual element as other organizations are trying to meet needs. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. I think the reverse of that is true, is they called you, but to be proactive and call those entities in town that you already have a relationship with. If your church has already served an elementary school or two that are closest to your building, that principal has had lots of stuff to do this month, getting ready to reopen. So they may not have thought to call you for help, but if you were to call them and say, we are here to serve you, how can we help? Because you know them already through your prior service to them, you won't be a blind date for them. They'll know you and trust you and say, oh yeah, you could help us in this way or this way. And so I do like the idea, like the West Waynesboro Church, of churches that are, one of the things that we heard from several churches is that they are providing not just backpacks for school, which a lot of churches, every year will do backpacks for school, but to customize that now for home-based school is how do you do backpacks or homework packs or virtual learning packs for students and for even the parents. There's one church in Fayetteville, North Carolina, that did teacher slash parent survival kits for the parents. And it had Advil in it and lifesavers and coffee and chocolate, a stress ball. They're putting those gel eye masks that you can put in the freezer. And they're putting all those together and giving them to parents who have to take care of their kids all of a sudden and teach them rather than going to school. So being creative and outside the box is huge. And so I love that what churches are doing, having to shift that traditional backpack go to school to a home-based scenario. Another church in Charlottesville, North Carolina, Cherry Avenue, is providing those, but they're having the families come to the church building on a particular day to pick theirs up. And it's not just to pick it up and they hand it to them, but there are socially distanced water games to play and sidewalk chalk and bounce houses and an ice cream truck. And so they're making that a big welcome to the community from the church to come get your new pack for your kid to go to school from home. So there's really great ideas that we're seeing from churches about how they can really tell parents, we're here to serve you and love you. So that being said, Rachel, why don't you tell us about the genesis of this whole conversation with the Area 10 Church in Richmond, and then this resource that you all put together that we can kind of walk through to help churches think through this well.
Yeah, so Area 10 is located in downtown, or like the heart of Richmond, Virginia, which is a really interesting space to be because in the Commonwealth, the city is separate from all the counties. So we have also 3 counties basically touching the city of Richmond as well, and they're all making their own decisions. So about 2 weeks ago, Richmond City Public Schools made the decision that they were going to go back to all virtual. And so on Monday night, my husband is a teacher in Chesterfield County Public Schools. And so he watched the 4.5-hour long, school board discussion, and I was in and out on it. But through that, I really felt the weight of the discussion that was going on, different parents coming forward and saying, like, we just don't know what we're going to do if we go back all virtual. And so that was really heavy on my heart the next day, because that is a lot of local counties are deciding to do now in our area, since we're a more populated part of the state, is all virtual, at least to start. So pretty much the next day at work, we kind of had a heart-to-heart, like, what do we do about this? Because this feels really heavy. And so we, especially in Richmond, there's a lot of underserved communities. There's a lot of poverty, even in the schools. And so we know that the largest percentage of child abuse and neglect cases are reported by teachers. And so not having kids in those normal rhythms where they have adults who are looking out for them, can know what the signs are, that's a really heavy thing, that even though it's safe in the public health issue, it's really a much less safe scenario for students that are whose parents can't stay home with them, and maybe they don't have food in the refrigerator. So we've been talking about, since we're in the city, we don't have a lot of physical space. We do actually have a building now, which is wonderful, but it is our workspace. There's not a lot of areas to tuck kids in, but we do have an outdoor courtyard area that's kind of at this point a blank slate. And so our idea right now is that we are going to basically create a park that never needed to exist before, but does need to exist now, because so many families are just unsure of like what indoor spaces look like. How crowded is it going to be? How far can I spread out? How often has this been cleaned? But like public parks can feel a lot safer. And so we're planning on building a lot of shade structures and providing free Wi-Fi, and maybe creating opportunities for kids to get away from the computer for a little while, maybe teaching yoga classes or doing music. And and story time and things like that, an opportunity for kids to get out of the house, still have some social interaction, but do it in an environment where families might feel a little bit more safe coming to. So for us, it may not be a lot of instruction and tutoring, but we have been blessed with a space in the city of Richmond that we can kind of customize for such a time as this. Like, we never expected that this is what we courtyard area. Now we have the opportunity to build something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the city of Richmond for parents and students.
All right. I'm going to interrupt you because you haven't said this yet, but I know you guys are doing this, and I saw one other church that replied to us as you guys are having a webinar or something at some point about training
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
Homeschool parents are going to train non-homeschool parents how to homeschool their kids. The Journey Church in Springfield, Virginia told us the same thing. So explain that a little bit before we dive into your document.
Sure. So we are fortunate to have a lot of connections with people who have been in the homeschool world for a long time and are willing to share their expertise and knowledge. And so we meet at a movie theater. We just had our first Sunday where we were kind of doing a dress rehearsal for being back in there. So we've got seats that we're able to mark off. And so we're planning on streaming this panel discussion with 3 different homeschool teachers in our area. It's going to be this Wednesday. If you're in the Richmond area, you're more than welcome this Wednesday at 1 p.m. at the Bird Theater. And so people will be able to come live and socially distance, but we're also recording that, and we'll release that online at a later date. And so hopefully that will help encourage and empower parents who have never really done the homeschool thing, are very defeatist about it. You know, the spring didn't work for us, but maybe learning some tips and techniques from people who have been doing this for a long time will be helpful. And releasing that digitally gives us the opportunity to reach people that are outside of Richmond, that are, you know, all over the country, that are struggling with this right now.
Yeah, and Tim, I would say, you know, to piggyback that, my wife is a school teacher as well, kindergarten teacher. And so she has been really stressed about how parents are going to teach their 5-year-olds how to read. And so we've been putting packets together that are huge. And I'm like, if I were a parent receiving all this, I wouldn't have any clue how to even begin to do it. And so, like, my wife has been saying to her principal, if we go all virtual, am I going to get a chance to meet with the parents to teach them a few things? And we don't know if that's going to happen, but that is something that churches could offer too. Even if you don't have homeschooling parents, if you have teachers and they're going to be overworked, I get it. But if they're like my wife, they care enough about kids. They want their kids to succeed, and they know that with virtual learning, it's all about the parents' ability to be able to help, especially those younger kids, 3rd grade and below. They can't do it on their own. And so to provide some trainings in your church where teachers just offer some tips and suggestions, or maybe it's a document that they write up, would be a welcome help for parents, I know.
Yeah, and the church can be thinking of that because everybody else is thinking in their own silo right now, but the church can be thinking about how can we help everybody work together. So that's a great spot for us. So I'm going to share the screen right now, this document that Rachel and her team put together and then customized it for us today. But I want to say going into this that we're going to send you a link to the PDF for this, so that if your church would like to work through this document to brainstorm through this, we'll also send a link once Rachel has recorded the streaming of her homeschooling training that's happening later this week. We will send it to all of you who have joined us today so that you could take a look at that if you'd like to. But Rachel, we've got about 8 or 10 minutes for you to kind of run through the idea of what's going on this 2-page PDF that you guys created.
Sure. I'll try to run through it real quick as fast as I can. The first 3 questions are kind of grouped together, and this is more about identifying the needs that are actually in your community, because I think a lot of times as churches we want to jump in really quick, and what we think the problem is not actually the problem that our people are having. So taking a moment before you just dive into a plan to really assess the needs of your community, and asking, like, students, not just their parents, but students, like, what do you need? And this could be a great opportunity for the kids in your youth group to get involved in making like a really big difference. Like, what do you need? What would help you this school year? It could just be that they need opportunities for social interaction. It could be that they need tutors to help them with their math homework. It could be just providing a space that has Wi-Fi and is, available and is a good place for kids to come and study. Or it could just be like we talked about, doing yoga classes outside. That is something for them to do that's tangible and not in front of a screen, because they're going to be in front of screens more than ever.
Yeah, if that's possible, the kids are going to be in front of screens even more.
Yeah.
I did get a question. I'm going to interrupt you right now,
Yeah.
Rachel. We keep diving in. We did have a question about what items go into the homework toolboxes that the West Waynesboro Church, as well as others, are doing. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I will follow up with those and include that. There's a follow-up email that gets automatically generated 24 hours from now, and we'll include the link to this PDF as well as those kind of resources in that follow-up email that you'll get from us or through Zoom. All right, go ahead.
Okay. The fourth question is like, which of these initiatives, once you've taken the time to go and sort through, like, what are people saying they need? What are some common themes? Asking yourself, what initiatives do you feel like you're uniquely positioned to respond to? There's a lot of big words, but basically, like, this mountain is an incredible challenge. Like, it is way too big for any one church to try and solve on their own. And as much as I would love to see every church start their own little like private school, that's just not a possibility for most of us with the resources and the staffing that we have. So like, what is one piece of the puzzle that you feel like God has put you in this time in this place for this opportunity? It might be space, it might be volunteers, it might be financial assistance to another organization that's already doing it. But I think that it's important that even as churches, we're communicating with each other and saying like, hey, we're in the same area. Like, if you're able to take, Mondays for tutorings, we could do Wednesdays, and this other church could do Fridays, and we can create a network that parents can access depending on what their needs are. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel on your own. And then like Paul was talking about, partnering with the Boys and Girls Club, we're looking at working with a local organization called the MICA Initiative. There are community organizations in your city, I guarantee it, that are already have the staffing and volunteers and policies and procedures in place, where if you can just plug into those ready-made resources, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. But there's some other great examples. I think you already mentioned West Waynesboro with the Salvation Army. But there's so many great local organizations, whether they're Christian or not, that may have the framework that you need to build off of. And then I think this is important, is how do we make this ministry equitable and inclusive? I think our first gut reaction might be, how do I serve the people in my church? And that is a great question to ask, but I think we need to open that up, because there are other communities that don't have the support system that our church members already have. And how do we open up whatever we decide to do to the community around us? Is there, if we're starting a preschool or something, is there a way that we can provide scholarships for, I think, Exie at
My church in Fuquay Arena, yes.
Yes, in Fuquay Arena, they're planning on doing like a day school, but then also really looking hard at how do we make this available to people that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford it on their own. So I think that's important. And then how can we use our facility for maximum impact? We've already talked about Area 10, but Chester Christian Church is talking about just opening up their staff, their building, and providing staff to be available, just making that a space where students can come and work on their homework that's safe, that has Wi-Fi, that, their parents wouldn't feel uncomfortable dropping them off at. So I think that's a really great opportunity. Even if you can't provide a lot of like intentional one-on-one time with students, just open up your doors. If you've got a youth room, like keep that youth room open throughout the week for kids to come and do homework. And then you have to start getting into the nitty gritty of logistics and staffing and legal questions. I love one of the examples that someone gave about making PPE for teachers, because teachers are being given, I think, like 2 masks, but they're being required to be at school every day. So maybe you can create a little mask making army, but you still have to figure out the logistics of that. Like, where are the materials coming from? Where do those masks get dropped off? How do they get delivered to the teachers? So even really simple, like concise ideas like that have details behind them, and who is the person that is responsible on your staff for figuring all of that out and coordinating it. Do you have an outreach person on staff, or are you relying on volunteers for it? Or do you have the ability to hire someone specifically just to focus on this for a while, even if it's just like a 6-month trial run kind of thing, and then we'll see where we are from there.
Rachel, just along with that, I was thinking as well, even as you were saying that, teachers right now are spending a lot of money out of their own pockets to prepare, to get things into the hands of students and teachers or parents. What a great ministry for a church to pick up elementary school and to give each teacher $100 and say, hey, we just want to help you provide the resources that your kids need. Kind of goes along with what you're saying as well.
Yeah, they may be not forgotten, but as parents are so wrapped up into trying to figure out how to teach their kids, the teachers right now are in a strange place trying to figure out how to do in-person teaching and virtual teaching, figuring out what to do with their kids while they're teaching. And so the whole teaching, the educational community is a great place to look for ministry, like special gift cards, or the one church in Fayetteville that did parent survival kits is also doing teacher survival kits as well that are specific to COVID, just to say, teachers, we realize you guys are going through a tough time. Here's some chocolate, here's some Advil, here's some things that you'll need to teach well online versus your typical classroom environment. And so I love that, the way churches are thinking about that. Someone just chimed in as a great question, what are some other ideas for churches without a permanent facility? Both of those are great non-facility related things. Is how can you serve parents with any kind of resourcing of physical things, or coaching about teaching your kids from home, or even managing your kids learning from home, which is different than teaching them. But then also serving your teachers and school administrators is something you don't need a building for. So those are great ideas.
But also I love what New Life is doing as well, Tim. They are strategically empowering their people to create microsites within their neighborhoods. And so it's not about bringing kids to the building, but it's how do you empower your congregation to identify their subdivision, their neighborhood. How can they reach out to, they know which houses have kids. How can they reach out? How can we help them to do that? Like we have a high school student whose mom teaches at an elementary school 500 yards from their house. On Wednesday, which is supposed to be the cleaning day, sterilization, well, the parents can't have their kids with them, or the teachers can't have their kids with them at school. This teenager's opening her house to say, you can drop them off at my house while you're at school, pick them up after you're done. And so there's things people can do in their homes as well if we get serious about trying to meet those needs.
Yeah, I love that New Life was doing that, to say, let's make a neighborhood. A mom says, hey, come to my house and I'll make sure while you're at work, your kids do their homework, and do that in a neighborhood rather than coming. And even though New Life has a building, they're doing that strategically to be having disciple making opportunities, conversations through the church, through the homes. And so I do love that. That's great. All right, go ahead and Rachel, and wrap us up real quick on this document. Anything else we need to know from this?
Sure. I would say the last question is maybe one of the most important, is what will we say no to in order to say yes to this? Because if you're anything like us, we have a ton of ideas and we want to try and do it all, but there's just not enough hours in the day. And so strategically thinking about, maybe for this, next 6 months, maybe we, hold back on, put the brakes on this other side of ministry so we can really focus in on solving some of these problems, and we can send them some volunteers that would typically be doing this, or maybe reallocating a staff member's time. It's just, we can't say yes to everything. We can't solve every problem. We need to bear in mind the needs of our staff and their ability to go home and spend time with their families in the evenings. Guarding and protecting that is also really important. So yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Well, that's great stuff. Our time is just about up. I do want to tell you about a couple of the things that could help you think through this whole area. Is that well, someone asked, Ed did, yeah, you do have to understand the difference between hosting and tutoring versus providing childcare. I have seen those churches that do have childcare facilities in their building that they're figuring out how they can reach out to, like day rather than week or month, but they can do day visits for older kids, not just preschool, but elementary kids can come for a day, use your building in that way. But you do have to understand the legal implications of having extra people in your building for sure. But here's a couple of resources we hope, let me go share this right here, that we hope, we did our regular monthly webinar just past Monday, a week ago, was New Realities for Youth Ministry. It was a 55-minute conversation from 3 youth ministers at good churches in our region about how youth ministry is changing. We've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks for the New Reality for Children's Ministry from 3 good children's ministers here in our region from Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina. And so those may be helpful to you as well. I'm also going to put together another 10 in 10 video that'll come out midweek, which is just really a compilation of some of these ideas of here's 10 ideas in 10 minutes that your church can think about for serving teachers and parents and students during this time. But we're about done with our time. We're glad that you've joined us. I don't know if you've got any other questions. We're going to be open for a few more minutes if you've got any other questions that we can then answer after the fact for you. But there will be an automated email that comes out in a day or so with that document, as well as some other resources that might be helpful to you as you do this. But the big part is really to lift up your head, open your eyes, and see the field ripe for harvest of a whole community needing help right now. And the church can be that place that partners with them in a very practical way through this time. So we hope that you find a good way to do that in your context, in your community. And as always, Waypoint is there to walk alongside you to do that. Our byline is that we're navigating ministry together at Waypoint. And this is one of those places with youth ministry, children's ministry, community partnership that we hope that we can help you navigate this strange season together. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you at one of our upcoming webinars here, whether they're our regular monthly webinars or our special pop-up webinars that we have from time to time. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, Paul and Rachel, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.